Today it's really hard to find a really long circuit in modern racing. To be honest, nothing besides Isle of Man, Nürburgring Nordschleife and Circuit de la Sa, first and latter one being active for like 1 week a year, comes to my mind. And before you type that comment, I know there's probably a BDSM autodrome in Bhutan which is longer than all of them combined. But in contrast to today, being a long circuit up to like 1970s was kinda cool. Nürburgring combined with its smaller brother Südschleife, Targa Florio, Spa-Francorchamps, Isle of Man, Monza decided to build an oval to be exactly 10 kilometers long, Bremgarten was 200 meters longer than today's Spa, but that's only one way to torture cars, because there existed events like Mille Miglia, and if you had 3 weeks, you could participate in a rally through a whole continent of South America. So it isn't a surprise that the longest F1 track hosted the Grand Prix back in the 1950s. Although, contrary to popular belief, the event itself was hosted in Italy, not Germany. The ultimate round of 1957 season was hosted on Pescara. This 25.5 kilometer pizza-like shaped monster started hosting races in 1924, under an unnamed Coppa Serbo, after a brother of a fascist politician. Interestingly, name was changed after World War II to Pescara Grand Prix. I wonder why. Let's come back to Coppa Serbo. A first race was won by Enzo Ferrari, for whom it was the last Grand Prix victory in his driving career. He was driving Alfa Romeo, a manufacturer which joined the event to test its new car. The event ended up being quite popular among Italians and was a good testing ground. Pizza slice-like layout offered a good mix of both corners and long straights. The event was hosted nearly every year since 1924 to 1939, with a break in 1929 because of road renovations. With new Grand Prix regulations came Germans with their new auto unions and Mercedes. With cars going faster than ever, a chicane was added. German manufacturers went, cool, and dominated till 1938. Glory to Italian manufacturers was reclaimed by Clemente Biondetti, although just because in 1939 German drivers were needed somewhere else. Event came back to life in 1947, after citizens realized there's nothing really interesting happening in the city anymore. First 3 years after revival were run under sports car regulations, but in 1950 they decided to run under Formula 1 regulations, coming back to pre-war Grand Prix glory, although it wasn't classified as a Formula 1 championship round. Till 1955 track was having an existential crisis. It simply couldn't decide if it wants to do sports car racing or Formula 1. So we ended up with this weird pattern of 2 years of Formula 1 and 2 years of sports car. 1955 race was cancelled due to obvious reasons. A year later everyone pretended that nothing happened, hosting the event again up to sports car regulations. But a year later track barely ended up on Formula 1 calendar, because Dutch, Spanish and Belgian Grand Prix were cancelled due to financial reasons, and F1 needed a track which will patch the gaps made by those three. It was perfect for Pescara because it ended up on Formula 1 calendar as a championship round, for its first and only time. Also, the Grand Prix was a 25th edition of the event. Alongside it, track has secured the record of the longest track to host a Formula 1 Grand Prix, which it holds to this day. 16 drivers entered the Grand Prix, with majority being, you guessed it, British. Pole position was scored by Fangio, who did a time 10 seconds faster than Sir Stirling Moss in P2. Gap between P1 and P16 was a 1 minute 50 seconds and 6 tenths. It seemed to be a battle between Maseratis, led by Fangio, and Van Vos, led by Moss. To add to the insanity of the race, drivers had to navigate those tricky Italian roads 18 times in order to finish the race. 2 hours before the start of the race, Fangio started complaining about pains in his right shoulder, but it didn't stop him from competing. At about 9:30 am, race started in conditions described by Wikipedia as very hot. Starting at 9:30 am meant that the race would end in the middle of the day of an Italian summer. I guess someone really hated those drivers, huh? After the first lap, Lonely Ferrari led the battle between Van Vos and Maseratis. Although Brooks's Van Val decided to overheat and completely die, things started to go better for Van Val on lap 2 because Moss finally overtaken Lonely Ferrari and secured the lead. Despite of trying his best, Musso couldn't do anything about Moss. British driver was simply driving a race of his life. Meanwhile, Maseratis were suffering from no pace, but at least they were still in contention, which couldn't be said about one pal of Lewis Evans, in which tires started to disintegrate. Lap 4 marked the end of Maserati driven for Berra after oil started showing in places it shouldn't be. This lap also saw enlargement of the gap between Musso and Moss. I'm guessing Lewis Evans bought a fresh compound of Pirelli tires because lap 5 marked another tire issue. 9th lap saw the fastest lap by Moss, who did 9 minutes 44 seconds and 6 tenths, but Musso was still keeping up behind him. Sadly, his speed was too much for his Ferrari, which started to disintegrate and left a trail of oil. This gift wasn't very anticipated by Fangio, who lost control of his car and damaged a wheel. With Musso gone, Moss had just to coast to the finish, because a quick pit stop for repairs lost Fangio another 2 minutes. Argentinian went out of the pits 3 minutes behind Moss, who obviously won the race, with podium being completed by Fangio and American Harry Schell in another Maserati. It was first of the 2 podiums American will ever score in his Formula 1 career. Event was a success with 200,000 people attending. Despite this, track wasn't hosting races for next 2 years. It came back in 1960s, this time in Formula Junior regulations, winning Danny Hulme in his Cooper. Opportunity to host last race on Pescara was taken by World Sports Car Championship. 4 hours of Pescara was won by pair Bandini Scarletti in Ferrari 250 TR61. First race won by Enzo, last by his car. Everyone agreed that track is just simply too dangerous. Roads are still in place, but if you want to do a hot lap, just do it with legal speed. And if you want to do it with full speed, just remember that every policeman in this area knows about circuit's history. Now typically should be a segment about why circuit met its demise, but there's nothing to say apart from it's too long. Welcome to How Not to Make a Racing Circuit Board. Let's add too long. Great. And now there's nothing more for me to do besides thank you for watching, see you in the next one, and goodbye.